Okay, verifying. Okay, should be fine. Okay, we hope for the best. Okay, so this is going to be part two of many parts, but this is probably going to be the second part of what would be like a first episode. I think between this stream and last stream, there's enough, I think, for a video. Maybe last stream alone was enough, but today I plan to go through Aphelios to Briar, and that should be a good chunk of champions. And we'll see how interested people are in this thing. Because I mean, it is something I enjoy, and it's probably not something only I enjoy. It's just a matter of finding the people uh, who share that feeling. So without further ado, let's continue with Aphelios. Aphelios has been a 2, 3, 4, 5 cost. 2 cost, 4 cost, 2 cost, 5 cost. Also, this Aphelios was goated, by the way. 4 cost, 2 cost, 3 cost. So we are missing a 1 cost. Now, Aphelios is like kind of interesting. I mean, all these champions are kind of interesting, but Aphelios is known for his 5-gun mechanic, and that's like the only thing he does. So we can kind of look at what guns have been used for an easy shortcut to finding like something that's left. So this is blue gun. I think this is only blue gun. Yeah. This is purple gun. This is, I think, white gun only. This is a lot of them. This is, I think, blue, red, purple. And this is blue, purple. This is red, and this is, I think, only white. But there's notably no green gun Apheliosis, and I mean, it's a pretty simple weapon, and we're missing a 1 cost, so I feel like we can do this. Let's open this up. I mean, okay, the idea I have is pretty simple. I'm gonna... Okay. And we'll also do this. So basically, what I had in mind is just Aphelios fires the bolt, and then so like the weapon combo that would be used would be green, white. So he just fires a projectile, and then once the projectile hits, he pulls it back, and then he gets a little chakra, and that will buff his AD for the rest of combat. I will try to demonstrate in League. Even though it's not really that complicated. Something that would be so nice in League is if you could swap champions. And practice tool. I think this effect would look cooler. Okay. So I'm kind of just gonna, yeah, do this. Okay. It is gonna be blue white, and the ability is just going to be fire projectile, deal damage, and then you get a little chakram for the rest of combat. And then for one cost, you could probably just make it give like 5 AD, like nothing crazy, but like you want it to like ramp up over the course of the fight, just to have a little bit of an interesting dynamic. This will be like a reroll unit. Like it'll just be like one cost Aphelios reroll. And yeah, and subsequent quests will get you more chakrams. So you're slowly ramping, not like a crazy amount of AD, but some AD. And that's about it. Mana cost probably like mid, like maybe like 60 to 80, somewhere in that range. And then, yeah. Because the AD ramping isn't going to be like crazy, I wouldn't do like what Riot likes to do, which is to lower certain stats to compensate for getting extra. So like, yeah, stuff like uh Trist, who has lower AD than she probably would if she didn't scale infinite AD. I don't think that would be necessary for this because this Aphelios wouldn't scale that crazily until like you're probably casting like at most like 5, 6 times a fight. So it's not like, yeah. Ash has been a 1, 2, 3, 4 cost. Has not been a 5 cost despite being in almost every set. I think missing set 10. She has not missed a set. Actually, she's not in this set either. But yeah. 5 cost Ash. That one's a little interesting because Ash doesn't have super flashy aspects of her kit. Like, so her identity is just Frost Archer, which, I mean, kind of gives you a little bit. In TFT, that gets degenerated to just regular Archer. Like, most of the sets, she's not even a Frost Archer. She's just an Archer. And if you look at Ash, like, she can't really be anything but an Archer. Like, she's got the bow and, like, I mean, like, she's for sure a backline damage dealer. At worst, as a utility unit. But in terms of her kit, like, it's mostly already been done, everything, because she's already been in so many sets. So, I'm thinking, what spell could she possibly have that would be worthy of a 5 cost? Uh, 5 costs are known for their big impact spells. Uh, you could also do something where like you can give her like a passive, like a unique trait, and that could be like her 5 cost value. You can make her like a more simple spell. But then I realized like if we're just going based off of Archer, then that means Hawkshot actually has kind of some value as a spell, just as the idea of throwing something that's AoE and that explodes. And I mean, that can be a 5 cost spell. You can make that do anything. You can literally make that do anything. So I'm thinking a 5 cost Ash would probably just throw Hawkshot, and then this will explode, do damage, and then do something. It'll maybe chill. It can maybe mana reave. It can. I don't think. I mean, I think a stun like that would be a little not balanced. I'm trying to remember which, like what, set 9 Heimer? I think it was set 9. That had a problematic stun. Or like set 7 Bard. Or, I mean, like, also like set 8 Janna. Like, 5 cost having huge CC spells is kind of problematic. But, I mean, if you balance the mana cost, you can also, yeah, I guess you can make it stun. But, yeah. Just straight up Hawkshot. And I feel like that would just be fine. Because none of these other spells, I mean, like, you would have to make a custom spell otherwise, which, I mean, you can do. But I feel like it would be easier to just use Hawkshot. Because I know, like, some people are just going to be like, oh, just make, like, volley, except it's all, like, arrows or something. Like, that's never going to happen. That's just the disgustingly unfun to play against. And I'm thinking, like, it's either Hawkshot or maybe, like, something with her Q, and she just is a carry. But I feel like that gets kind of boring. That's more 4 cost territory, and that 4 cost Ash has already existed as well, so I feel like this slot can be really easily taken up just by making Hotshot do something that isn't give vision, because that doesn't matter in TFT. I mean, technically, another effect you can do is like if you want to like replicate the like expose, you can make it so that they take bonus damage. Like Hotshot explodes, does damage, and then units hit by it take bonus damage for 5 seconds. Like that works too. I mean, I think that's like kind of been done. That's like what set 7 Bard, except I think the Bard didn't do damage, but I mean it did damage amp, and it did stun. Alright, I have to be right back. Oh. I realized I used the wrong scene. I meant to use this one, but oops. Okay, whatever. Just quick, I'm back. Alright, so that's Ash. I feel like that's simple enough. Next we have Asol, which is first champ we're gonna see here. That I'm gonna have to do multiple. Asol is a space dragon. That makes it very difficult to print low-cost versions of this unit, of this champion. As a result, Asol has only been a 4 cost and a 5 cost. I mean, except for like this set or this one, or he's in. I mean, this is effectively a 5 cost. But yeah, we're missing a 1, 2, and 3 cost Asol, and that's gonna be a little tricky. Now, the thing we have going for us is that ASOL was reworked, so a lot of the older set ASOLs have old ASOL. So, while we have some abilities to work with, it is pretty difficult to repurpose ASOL into a lower cost unit without changing his identity as ASOL. Uh, so if Riot were to create custom spells for ASOL, it would probably be for another 4 or 5 cost ASOL. Because otherwise it wouldn't make sense, like, to make a spell for a Space Dragon. Like, I don't know, it's complicated, but like, his design makes it very difficult to simplify him. Because he's kind of this big spectacle. Like, he's like the highest level when it comes to lore power. So it's a bit tricky. Now we have his Q, which is just a like a flame breath ability. I don't think there's an ASL iteration that has used that, and I think that is pretty usable for a spell. It's also pretty generic, because I mean, well, this is technically like space dust or whatever. I mean, you can make this anything, and you can kind of make them like this is kind of okay to print as a lower cost. This flight ability might be I canceled it. It might be difficult to incorporate as its own spell because that's kind of like it doesn't do anything. But you can include it as part of another spell. However, I don't think I will need to be doing that, but you can do that before it wants to. Like that'd probably just be part of another spell, like for a 4 or 5 cost. But I'm not really gonna touch that because it's. I don't think it's needed. Because he uses this thing. It's an AoE. It pulls and slows and stuff. I mean, that's also pretty easy to use. A little hard to make in the context of being a low cost. Because even though, like, the effect is simple enough, visually, it isn't. But you can probably find a skin or make a custom skin that makes it more, like, believable that ASOL would be, like, a 2 cost. And then finally, ASOL ult. It's the same thing. Again, same problem, that the spectacle is pretty high, so it's kind of hard to make that a low cost. But if you use, like, custom skin, or, like, by custom I mean Riot makes another skin, because this is, like, TFT. And, like, this is also hypothetical. But, like, you would be able to make ASOL look like a lower cost type champion. And then it'd be fine, because the spell it's pretty simple enough. So, I don't know what order to go. 1, 2, 3. The other thing is that Aesol has this passive that when he hits people with abilities, he gets like permanent stacks of stuff, which is kind of like something you can use to tie into the identity of Aesol, so to make something feel more Aesol when it's a bit more complicated. So like one thing you can do is you can make it so like Aesol breathes fire, and when he kills a unit, he gets like 1 permanent AP. Yeah, and there's units that have that kind of like consistent damage, like laser system. I think of set 9 Lux. Whoops. This one. This is a forecast. She just channeled the laser. She also reduced magic resist, and then if they die, we shift to new targets. I think you can cut the magic resist, lower the damage a little bit, and then you can have that as like a 3 cost ASOL. Like he just fires, if he kills the unit, he moves, and then, yeah. And when he kills, he also gets like 1 permanent AP. I think you could do this at a lower cost too, but I feel like it might be easier to balance as a 3 cost, just because permanent stacking, like AP gets a little annoying, because unlike with AD, you can balance them around their stats. because low cost you can reroll and reroll you can scale, but AP is like a little iffy. So I would imagine that this stacking AP isn't like a huge part of ASOL's kits, but it would help a little bit. Like in a reroll ASOL game, you'd probably get to like maybe like 40 or 50 AP. Like you're gonna get like something crazy like 100, but like it would be something that's like impactful, but not a like significant portion of the power budget. I think that would be a 3 cost, though it can be argued for lower. It's all kind of flexible because it's not like I have like a 1 and a 4 cost where you can very clearly distinguish which should go where. Here it all kind of goes, it all kind of blends together, and you can kind of just adjust numbers and add or remove things to like change the cost value. So this is another one. This could be like a 1 hex AoE that it just does damage over time. This has been done before a lot of times in a lot of units. Let's look at this one. I think of like this Misfortune, it was like an X shape. This Misfortune, I think it was just a 1 hex AoE. Deprived Grievous Wounds. This could also be like just duplicating this. It could also be a 3 cost ability. I think if you just like simplify the effects and just lower the damage a little bit, you can be 2 cost. You can also swap the previous one, make that a 2 cost, and then make this a 3 cost. This has also been like a Nivea. That one also comes to mind. The 3 cost Nivea from this set. This one. Actually, this one was also that too. This was a 5 cost, and I mean they just had the numbers crank. They also actually I didn't even know this was a thing, but yeah. Like just the idea of a damage over time AoE is not that bad to work with. And obviously the pull effect is complicated, probably won't go in. The slow would be a little complicated. You can, maybe like on a 3 cost version, you make it like chill or something, or mana reave or... Yeah. And then 1 cost, I think the more interesting one is just because I actually want to use his ult here. But I mean, it's just going to do that. It is just going to be an AoE, and that's it. I feel like that's simple enough for 1 cost. I think with the right skin and theme, you can maybe make that a believable 1 cost. But I mean, yeah. And if you really wanted to incorporate the big ults, I don't think that would be a good idea. At least not for a 1 cost. Like, I'd probably just ignore that part. But it's just AoE, no stun. It's just AoE damage, and that's it. You can make that a 1 cost. I feel like trying to go more complicated with Asol, who's already, by design, a very complicated champion, thematically, like, it just becomes too difficult. So that'd be my 1, 2, and 3 cost Asol. 2 and 3 you can swap around, honestly. Like, it is whatever. Azir. Azir is kind of in a similar boat to Asol in that thematically he's a little hard to make a low cost version of. There's a little bit more room because, I mean, he's not a space dragon. You can try to find... I mean, he's an emperor, and his gimmick is summoning soldiers, which is kind of hard to print as a low-cost unit. Like, literally all of his abilities in League are based on summoning sand soldiers. And summoning things is really hard to make as a low-cost unit. So, I mean, I'll figure it out. But he's been a 3 cost in this set, which saves me a lot of trouble. Because if I had to do what I did for Asol and make a 1, 2, and 3, it'd be a little hard to distinguish what goes where. But I only have to do 1 and 2 cost. So let's actually look at what this 3 cost is. This is kind of like the bar. So he actually summons a soldier, and remember, this is set 2. This was a very problematic set, and I feel like Azir was one of the more problematic units design-wise. I think, I don't remember how strong he was, because I did not play this set very much, but I remember that set 2 had so much, like, really, really cringe design, and it was just like, it was just a problem. But yeah, this was later, like, this idea was later moved to other sets. I think this is just Wall, but this set Azir did summon soldiers, and then as I think as a 4 cost, it's a bit better, or as a 5 cost it could work. And then this was made a 5 cost. I feel like they could have made this a lower cost, just remove the statue. It would save trouble, but I'm not gonna reprint that. I'm gonna try to come up with something myself. But it would have been a bit better. Like, I think that was the opportunity to print a low cost Azir. Go with this one. It's like literally all of these things are based on his soldiers, like, so it's a little tricky. Let me like, revisit what this one did, because yeah, okay, the existence of this one makes it hard to come up with 2 in 1 cost versions. I think at its simplest you can kind of do what I did with the Asol ult, and you can kind of just make like that's a spell, like a 1 cost spell, or maybe a 2 cost. And it's just a damaging projectile that just does AoE, and like it has the spectacle of looking like you're summoning soldier to stab, but like complexity wise, it's not that complicated at all. But then to create another spell that would be different, that's a little tricky. We also have this Sun Disc, which could do something. This is kind of adjacent to summoning a soldier. You're summoning a Sun Disc, which is a little annoying. But the idea of the Sun Disc kind of can do something. You can make it so that Azir sort of like, I mean, he's like not ascending, but he's like calling to the Sun Disc, and then he just uses this to shoot projectiles that aren't Sand Soldier related. I feel like that kind of works because the Sun Disc is effectively a turret. So like if you look at what a turret does, it just shoots these like beams, and the Sun Disc is the same thing, except it looks like a Sun Disc. But I feel like you could just make it so that Azir kind of, okay, I'm gonna this is not gonna work. That's very well. That's what items I go for here. And my dogs are going a little crazy, but fortunately a good chunk of this will be cut out. The other stream will hear that. And that is not ideal. I don't know, it makes them do more damage to towers. I should not use that ability. I'm just doing this for... yeah, because I want to summon his passive. Okay. Now we look at what the Sun Disk actually does. Now, these things also need to die, and that's a little... that's gonna be annoying. Actually, I'm gonna... where is it? Resets minions. This does not last very long. But yeah, it just is a tower. It summons these beams. You can make it so that like Azir just summons this above himself, and then it just fires like bolts that do more damage. Can I do this? Yeah. And that kind of transforms Azir into like something else, but it's still technically Azir. And the spell is like kind of it works on its own. And like just like this, like just imagine Azir doing this. These will just do like bonus magic damage. Like it'll be like attacks, or it won't even be attacks. It'll just be like the spell just will constantly fire bolts at the current targets, and that's it. I feel like that is simple enough that it could work, even though like it has kind of a bit of spectacle. You could make that a 2-cost. Like please believe that that could be a 2-cost. Like I can't otherwise. I mean it's fine. But now we're moving to the bees. I mean maybe I don't know, depending on how long the rest take. I don't have that much time, but I'm moving faster than I thought I was. Because I mean I did a little bit of rethinking. So Bard. Bard has been... the Bard's kind of like... identity-wise also kind of difficult. He's been a 3, 2, and a 5-cost, so we're missing on a 1 and a 4-cost Bard. Now, fortunately, I was cooking with this one, so I already know exactly what I want to do. But yeah, identity-wise, Bard is like pretty difficult because he's like the celestial being that doesn't really like... it's hard to like give him direction other than probably ranged. That's about it. Like even in League, it's kind of hard to tell what Bard like does. Like he just kind of like moves around, stuns everyone, and like yeah. But like in terms of like design for units for TFT, it's a bit difficult. Like Riot found a way to use his ult as a spell in set 7. That became one of the most broken outcasts in the history of the game, so I don't know how I feel about reprinting that. However, and then the other spells are just really, really annoying to use. Using his E, I don't even know how that would be possible. You would have to make that like a 5-cost, and then stuff would have to come out of the portal. But that 5-cost has already been done, so Yeah, and that's also like a spell, like that's been a spell that's existed because we've had like Thresh and Syndra. So I mean like that'd be fine, but that's not what we're doing here because it's a 5 cost spell. And then as literally anything lower, it would probably be problematic unless you do the Azir Sundisk treatments and he just summons a portal above himself. Can I like make those? Uh, Summons a portal above himself, and then stuff comes out of the portal and does damage, and it just works like 4 cost rise. So honestly, this could be a 4 cost bard. However, I have a better idea that I think is more fun. So actually, I'm just gonna talk about that one immediately. So we have these shrines. These are a little annoying because they heal, but like, and over time they become a better heal, and that's it. However, I think this is pretty interesting because at first I wanted to make a support this. I was thinking of a 1 cost version and like, oh, you make this like it's a delayed heal, but I feel like that'd be kind of awful. And then I realized, well, that's like noise, kind of like can have a bit of impact. Like that kind of implies that something is there. So I'm like, okay, you can make that be like an explosion, and that could be like it'll be like a timed explosion, and then at that point, the explosion I associate with damage. So basically, the idea I had was for Bard to lay down these shrines, and these become like delayed bombs. And then when they can explode, dealing damage, and then they can also like heal allies. Like they're gonna target. Okay, I have to move into like this. We'll use Renata Glask as Bard. We'll use Vander as the enemy. So they're gonna prioritize hitting. Like they're just gonna be on an empty hex, that near. Like not, I'm not sure how to do with in range without increasing his range. I mean, you could probably just make it. I don't know if they would take up their own hex or if they just exist on a hex with a unit on it. But it's basically a 1 hex AoE that, after a delay, does damage and heals nearby allies. Prioritizing doing damage to enemies, but if allies happen to be in the blast, they can heal a little bit. Not a crazy amount, like 150 or something. Like, remind you, this is like a 4 cost, so it can be like 150, 200 or something for the healing. That might even be too high. But and then the focus is on damage. So he summons these things and like his spells summon 3 of them nearby enemies, and then they explode, and then that's it. I think visually that would have a pretty interesting impact. I think audio wise that would also have a pretty like it'd be pretty satisfying. It could be like after a while it's like boom boom boom, but then and it heals and does damage. And I think like the 3-star 4 cost version can be like it summons 5 of them or something. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I'm cooking with that one, but I'm not sure if that's will be something people agree with or not. 1 cost. I think simple enough. Just make Bard empower himself, and then his next 3 autos do like the meep effect. But like specifically that like when he has more stacks and has like the AoE, so Bard would like have 3 meep autos, and then they do bonus damage, and then AoE in the cone, and then that's it. He just gets like 3 of those autos. That's a pretty 1-cost spell. And if you use a skin like, I mean, even though this was the 5-cost one, you can do a skin like this one and make it a 1-cost in a different theme. Maybe some kind of pirate theme. Yeah, that's my Bard units. Bel'Veth. So Bel'Veth is a pretty recent champion. That makes it a bit difficult to come up with. Especially because Bel'Veth's kit is like also pretty Like when like all her spells kind of go together, and as a result, she's kind of already been done throughout the two versions of her that have existed. So she's a 4 and a 5 cost. I feel like you'd have to overly simplify her to print her as a lower cost. Just on a mechanic standpoint, not even like theme wise, you can probably figure something out. It's kind of a Azir ASOL adjacent, but like I think a little bit more manageable. So Belveth is kind of ambiguous as a unit. So in League, she's bruiser, like melee. I think design-wise, you can kind of make an argument for ranged. If you were to make some kind of spell for Belveth that is like ranged, like she's like the brood mother, or I mean, no, she's not. That's Rek'Sai. She's the queen, but like the point is she can summon stuff, and like that can be kind of a ranged thing if you wanted to. However, I think there's other ways. I feel like with just melee, you can also make it work. So her abilities, all right, her passive, which I want to talk about because I want to use it. When she like hits stuff, she gets permanent stacks of like it's like her attack speed scaling is weird, but she gets permanent attack speed and permanent like on hit true damage. Or I don't know what that's a part of, but I guess it's a passive on her ult. But yeah, she gets permanent attack speed from hitting stuff, and that's a mechanic that you can incorporate into TFT pretty easily. Obviously, you have to balance her around it, but it's fine. Her Q is a dash. She has this directional stuff in League for, like, I guess, balancing purposes. Even though she has, like, a lot of dashes. But I feel like that would be annoying. You can just do without it, and it's just a dash. A dash that does damage, which I think is perfectly fine on its own to be something. Your W is this kind of knock-up thing. That also, like, even though it has a little bit of spectacle, there's like a void rift, you can make it work as a spell. It's pretty simple. It's a AoE knock-up. And then her E is this siphon thing. This has been what she's used for her existing versions, the 4 and 5 cost. And I feel like if you were to try to do something for like a lower cost, it would just not be interesting. And then her ult is like pretty situational, but I feel like her ult also wouldn't really be able to use. But there are some ideas for what we can do with the rest of her. So I think for a 3 cost, you can kind of just use the dash. And like she just like, it would work kind of like hero augment Irelia currently. Slash like, I mean that hero augment is just like 4 cost Irelia and stuff. And a lot of other units, but basically she would dash to her current target to deal damage. And that's it. And it would have like a lower mana cost, it would have like a 40 mana cost. You could also do something like gain bonus attack speed for like 3 seconds. And then lower her mana cost to like 20. That way she's like mana locked for a little bit, and she like dashes, does a lot of things, and then dashes again. I feel like gameplay pattern wise, that could be a 3 or 4 cost in this case, because we're looking for a 3 cost, it's gonna be a 3 cost. Yep. 2 cost, I think we could just use the W. I think this is kind of similar to certain versions of Yasuo. That's the thing that comes to mind. The one that with the tornado, you can make it so that she like repositions and then she does this, and it's just the same thing as like Try to find the correct Yasuo. But I know it's like, I think sets 8. Amongst other ones, I think there's been multiple versions. But I think specifically this Yasuo, uh, it's basically exactly this. Uh, so Bel'Veth will dash to an ideal position to like find more things in a line, and then it just knocks up stuff in a line and does damage. And I feel like this Bel'Veth did the same thing. And finally, for 1-cost Bel'Veth, we're going to utilize this passive. So this spell itself... Okay, so Bel'Veth will get permanent attack speed on kill. It is the same thing as Warwick from last set. It is this passive. Or, I mean, I guess movement speed is fine too, honestly. But it is this. Bel'Veth can have this. It would make perfect sense. It makes more sense on Bel'Veth than it did on Warwick. And it was like fine on Warwick. But like, it makes more sense on Bel'Veth. Because it's literally something that she has in like League, pretty much. And then instead of like this, Bel'Veth will have an actual spell. And her spell will make her do bonus true damage for like on hit for like let's say like 5-6 seconds. Like that's like her ult. So she'll have ramping attack speed, like just from like her scaling over like time. Like she get the permanent stacks, and then when she casts, she does true damage, and then that is a pretty big damage increase. And then yeah. And I think as a 1-cost, that's pretty easy to balance because the numbers aren't going to be so crazy. And you can stack it early, and it's like the same kind of gameplay pattern that like Warwick does. Like all these stacking units. Headliner, Yasuo, like all those that you want to stack early. And then true damage. It's kind of part of the core of Bel'Veth's kit, and it would work fine. It scales with the attack speed. You can just lower the numbers if it gets problematic. Yeah. Those are my 3 Bel'Veths. Yeah. I'm moving faster than I thought I would, but I think that's fine. Because I would have probably be able to stream again this week anyway, so I think it's okay to have a shorter one. XP plus Crank. I don't remember what I think he's been everything plus a 5-cost. Yeah, he's been everything but a 5-cost. So this one I have not pre-thunk, so let's figure out what we can do with Blitzcrank. Now, his main thing is the Blitz pull, and I feel like that wouldn't be very difficult at all to use. The Blitzcrank is a champion I feel like Riot's been pretty creative with in making spells that work with him. Like, I think they've done a really good job with the versions of Blitzcrank that have existed. So, because Blitzcrank, his kit is really simple. He has a shield when he gets low health. It's supposed to scale with mana, and that's kind of like the thing, except that's not really a big part of like this king. His Q is the pull. The pull is like most of the reason why you pick Blitzcrank in League, and it's like most of the identity of him. And I mean, if we're talking about a 5 cost, like they printed this on a 2 cost, and that was really problematic for them. I feel like you could kind of just print it on a 5 cost and it'd work, but I might figure something else out as well. His W, visually also very simple, boring. He gives him move speed and attack speed, and then afterwards he slows down for a little bit. His E is a knock up on his next auto. And his ult is probably the most interesting spell in his kits. Is a passive and an active. The passive is on hits, you create the little thing, and then afterwards a lightning bolt strikes. That's a rather new addition because it was like a mini rework. Well, I think a lot of people don't even know that, but yeah. And then the active is an AoE damage, and it silences and breaks shields. So 5 cost Blitzcrank has a bit to work with. And like Riot's done a good job because like a lot of these I feel like would have been really hard to get to. Like this is like playing off of, I mean, okay. Like okay, the shield is playing off of his passive, and then like the shocks are playing off of the ult passive. And like I guess this is just something they added. But like I feel like it's fine, and like a lot of other ones are fine. I mean, this is just a shield. But this one I feel like was also really good because it has like the zapping around, like, and that is kind of simulates this like a part of the Blitzcrank's kit that no one actually pays attention to. Let's turn these off. So for a 5 cost Blitzcrank, the first thing, like, obviously you could do something with the pull, like, to balance it around a 5 cost, you'd probably just have to have it be like a lower thing or like a resetting thing. And I mean, I think it's possible. However, I don't think people like having that in the game. But like, I think you can make it where he starts at max mana, he pulls just like old versions of what Blitzcrank did, and you just make it so that like he does that, and he does like bonus damage, and he like, yeah, so he has like his W and his R active, whatever, and then when he kills something, he just pulls again, and that would work. I think he would also like kind of have like maybe like a deep roots effect as well. I mean, that might be overloading at this point, but like I think if he's gonna pull stuff into his range, he kind of wants to move anyway. So I mean, it would be fine to just make him susceptible to CC as well. I guess that's also an option. But yeah, like let's say he pulls this thing, it dies. Yeah, and then now you're hitting this thing. And I think you could just make it to like the hook is like one component, but then he'll have an actual spell that's like, I mean, I guess the spell could be like this. I don't know, some combination of this and this. And I feel like to have both active at the same time, like permanently, might be a bit much. You can also throw a shield in somewhere. I feel like throwing this up might be a little bit problematic. Like, it'd be a little bit unfair. Because he already has the pull. But this turns Blitzcrank until, I mean, okay. So in League, Blitzcrank was supposed to be a fighter, but he got balanced around supports because that's, the pull is just too much utility. So this kind of goes back into like the fighter roots. I think so this skin especially. And you can just give him like, I'm gonna give him some more attack speed. and he just like and he just does that, and then when the thing dies, he pulls his next victim. People don't know that you can do that in League, because people also don't build these items on Blitzcrank. I mean, on an unrelated, I mean, on the context of Blitzcrank, but unrelated to TFT, one thing that people don't know you can do is that those lightning bolts proc malignance. And that's a really big damage increase. Like, even without attack speed. And, like, to get the lightning bolts, you have to not use the active of your ult. So you have to, like, pull, auto, E, and then you can, like, W a little bit. And with that alone, like, it's really high DPS for one item. Like, I think that's enough to win 1v1 against most champions that don't have, like, so there's some kind of disgusting healing. Because this item is not designed around being permanently procced. And as long as he autos, you can have it permanently active. Yeah, that's besides the point. So yeah, I think having Blitzcrank finally get his pullback as a 5 cost, and then go back into his fighter roots as Riot intended initially, like 2012 or whatever, then I feel like Blitzcrank will be a spectacle to behold. I have Brand. I think Brand has been a 1-2-4. Yeah. 1-2-4. It's also been a while since we've seen Brand. Try to use base skin here. So Brand is kind of simple. He's just a fire guy. That is his thing. His actual mechanics in League are a bit more complicated than that, and they're actually like pretty interesting to play around. But I mean, he's just a fire guy, so you can kind of just throw any fire-related ability and give that to Brand. However, his kit kind of lends itself to actually being pretty interesting. So let's talk about that. So we're missing a 3 and a 5 cost. I think these can be kind of similar in how they work. So, but let's talk about the previous versions of Brand. This one uses just his ult. It just did this, and they bounced around. It didn't have the explosion or anything, but it just bounced around and did a lot of damage. However, keeping that explosion in mind, we can use that in the future. I think some versions did like... Okay, so they did with his W. Which, I mean, that works. And then this they did with his Q, and it's like the same thing, where he just does damage and burns. Yep. Now, one spell that I think nowadays people, because of how they reworked Brand, that people actually associate with him is his E, because that's is probably one of the most annoying spells in the game to play against. So I feel like this can do a lot. I think starting with 5 cost, just because balance wise, I think this would have to be a 5 cost. But I think you can make it so that's Brand kind of just he uses E, and then yeah, it's literally just that. Now this would have to be balanced around 5 cost because having that much kind of spread would not be very balanced. But then he does it again. And notice that, like, when I did it the second time, it goes further. I think you can have that in the 5 cost Brand as well. So if so, Brand just uses his E, it does damage and it burns them. I don't know whether to make that burn like the same burn as like Morello, or just to make it like a dot like Malzahar. If you were to do that, you would just make it so that you just buy Morello on him anyway. So I don't know if that really does what you want, but I think if you were to innately have anti-heal, I think this application would be like too good. So I'm not sure if that would also be ideal. But I mean, either way, he E's, he burns, he hits current targets and AoE, and then when a target that is already burning is hit by his ability, it goes further. So I think for TFT you could just make it so that like it's like a 1 hex thing. So not like going across the whole board, but like let's say you have your Brand here, hits this thing and this thing, and then the second cast it'll hit these two again, but then also it'll spread to this one, and then you do it again, and it'll keep going as far as what are being touched. So this one will spread it to this one, and then if there's nothing else touching like the clump, it's not going to spread further. But each cast will damage all the ones that have already been burned. And then this burn, I think you can give it the Malzahar treatments, like the current set Malzahar, or it's just an indefinite burn. The difference is that this won't spread on kill, so Brand actually has to be alive for it to like become like a backline problem. But I think this could be a pretty strong Aqua spell. If that's a little, I don't know if I don't know how to actually calibrate whether that's like too strong or too weak, because it could honestly be either. But to make it weaker, I think you adjust the burn, and then to make it stronger, you can make it so that it spreads like further out. Not quite hitting backline, but you can make the spread 2 hex, maybe. Maybe like that was a bit iffy. And for 3 cost Brand, I think you can do the same thing, except instead of spreading, it's just like every 3 casts, just summons the ring, just on its own. Like it's not based on the target. It's just every 3rd cast, does damage and then summons a ring around the target's location, whether they are alive or whether they died or not. You just does AoE, and then every 3rd cast on the target location, uh, explosion in a 2 hex AoE. And there's gonna be no burn, no anything. It's just damage, and then explosion. And I think 3 cost, even though it's like kind of a big impact, uh, it's gonna be more of an AoE focus champ rather than a single target. It'll kind of struggle in single targets a little bit, but I think that'll be like a nice secondary carry. that could work. Yeah, those are my 3 and 5 cost brands. We have Braum. I think Braum has the same ones missing. He's been a 4 cost here and then 1 and 2 cost. Has he been a 1 cost? He's not been a 1 cost. Oh. They just I mean, okay, like half of these Braums are like just the exact same units. And then in the one goaded sets, he became a 4 cost. So we're actually missing a 1, 3, and 5 cost Braum. So Braum, identity-wise, he is guy with shield. A lot of the times, he's also guy with shield with ice power. But most of the time, he's just guy with shield. However, his kit actually does kind of lend itself to a lot of different things, so... You talk about that? So, in TFT, Braum has been mostly this. Like, he just does this. In set 6, the GOAT, he ults. He uses the CC units. But his other parts of his kit have stuff we can work with. Braum's passive, in League, it applies this thing, and then when you get to max stacks, it stuns the target. I think that could work in TFT, but it's kind of rough as a frontliner. Like, Braum has to be a frontliner. Like, look at him. Like, people would be super confused if he was not a frontliner. Like, this is one of the most frontliner units, like, in League. Like, yeah, there's no question there. And then his Q is the actual projectile that I fired. It just does damage and it slows. Kind of the same, like, okay, the passive you can incorporate, but the Q probably wouldn't work for Braum. So guys are like, why is this guy summoning a projectile? People would get a little confused because if it's a ranged projectile, you play him as ranged, and that'd be a little weird. But I think, so, like, simple enough, you can work with his passive and incorporate some other effect. So I think for actually, okay, his final ability, he leaps an ally and he gives them some defenses and stuff. That also can be used, and I already have an idea for that. So for 1 cost Braum, I think what you could just do is you can just make him give himself like a shield or something, and then he, like, his current targets also gets the mark, and then after stuff has hit the targets enough, it's done. Or you could just make it so that while Braum has his shield / resist / whatever defensive buff, when that expires, his next auto just stuns. Like, you can kind of just do that as well. It kind of strays away from the identity of Braum marking the targets. But I mean, if the target dies, you kind of want this spell to do something. I mean, and that's kind of a spell that already existed in, like, even more extreme form, where they have, like, AoE knockups. So what else you can do is you can make it so that Braum also does, like, bonus damage while his, like, defenses are up. So he shields himself and does bonus damage for like 3 seconds, and then after that expires, so his next attack stuns, dealing more bonus damage. And I think that could work as a one cost. Similarly, you could kind of just reprint this as well as a one cost, but I mean, that's already been done like 5 times, and they made that a 2 cost. And you can just lower the numbers and make it a 1 cost, but I feel like that's a bit done. So yeah, 3 cost Braum. I think I have a good idea here. He W's. He W's, and then specifically gives his, like, it'll be like kind of like Guardian. So he W's to a low health target, a low health ally. He dashes to them and gives them a shield, like himself and the ally a shield, and after he jumps, he taunts nearby enemies. Yeah, for like I don't know, it's like 4 seconds or something. So basically, he's giving the ally a shield and effectively an aggro drop, but like an aggro drop from melee, not from ranged. So like the taunt will only be like a small area. So it's kind of better for protecting backliners than it is for like melee frontliners, but you can kind of technically do either. I think 3 cost is like a really like a perfect place to put that. Cause he's like a tank, but he's like a supportive tank, which Braum is. Like that is what Braum is. So I think it works. And like he can be sufficiently tanky, just with how what the shield is, and like how big you make it. But then he's also like constantly like actively protecting your ally, so or just whoever is like the lowest. And I think that works. For 5 cost Braum, I'm a little unsure what to do. What I was thinking was kind of like what I did for I think it was 2 cost Alistar, but like it basically I want to play around the impact of like his shield being like just like his like a physical shield, the door, like being like a physical like huge like battering ram kind of thing, and basically he's just like shield bashes things, and he sends them flying backwards. I think the closest equivalence to what I have in mind is like, alright, Kiana. This Kiana, where she would send them flying. She would like do other stuff as well, and she's like a damage dealer. But this Braum would knock back. Let's look for a scuffed example here. Let's use Garen here. Garen, okay, Braum, like 5 cost Braum would around his current targets like knock back like, and then he'll like the buff himself like knock back in like a front facing arc AoE that's current target, but then also like feels like there's stuff here. He would knock back like all of them. I don't know what the angle would be. I don't know if this, because if it did that, I don't think that would be. I think you could just make it so that they all go like the direction of a thing. I guess that'd be too far, but he knocks them back, and then he could just like shield himself or something, or give himself durability. But like visually, it would look like that, kind of. Not. I'm thinking of like a literal shield bash, right? Like smashes his shield into them. Like he His shield, like his shield gets big, and he like sends them flying backwards. And it'll be like a high mana cost spell, and it'll be like, whoa, Braum, so cool. Yeah. And like I said, he just gives himself like a shield or something afterwards. Those are my Braum spells. Prior in the Belbeth boat, she's a new champion. Therefore, there's a lot of stuff nuts in the game. There's been one version of Briar in TFT, and that has been a 5 cost. Uh, this 5 cost version pretty much just combines all of her spells in League, so I don't know what to do for Briar. This one, not only have I not pre-thunk, I have to do 4 spells, so this one might actually take a long time. Hopefully not. So, in League, Briar is supposed to like represent like the violent vampire, like blood-hungry archetype, and her kit kind of does a pretty good job at that. The problem is that it's like I think it's too good at matching her theme to the point where if you were to stray from that, that would not be Briar. I think everyone would associate Briar with two things, which is like being frenzy and uncontrollable, and then maybe something like her ult, maybe. I don't know how much people actually think about that one. But the point is, I literally cannot like stop. And okay, I think that's literally until they die, right? I don't play Briar. Yeah, until death, like. So we have some other spells here that maybe we can look at. Okay, her passive. It's a bleed. It's a bleed on hits. And it's like healing. I don't know what Briar does. Well, I mean I know what Briar does, but I don't know what her like actual spells are. It's bleed and she heals off of the bleed. She gains increased healing based off of missing health. Her Q is a leap. It stuns. Also reduces armor and magic resist for some reason. This is Blood Frenzy. Okay, this is maybe something to play with. However, it's like kind of in the boat where people don't really think of this when they think of Briar, even though it's like visually it has like a really cool impact. I don't think people would connect that to Briar. And what I'm referencing when I say people like the association with the unit, it's like I forgot what part specifically, but there was like I remember when Riot were talking about like when Mort and the boys were talking about I think this one. No, it was this Jinx, and they're like, yeah, why did we use the traps? Like it almost doesn't make sense. Like people like don't think of the traps when they think of Jinx, and it's like identity wise, it's just really confusing. And I kind of agree with that idea that what the unit does should kind of reflect on what the identity of the champion is. So even though Jinx is like crazy multiple gun girl, people mostly associate her with like her rockets, maybe her minigun. I think you can argue the zap, even though not really, but at least in League, people recognize that the zap is like because she's gonna use it pretty often because it's like a long range thing. But the traps are like a situational defensive tool, so like people never think about well the traps actively. Like when you think of Jinx, and that's probably like the last of her full abilities that you would describe. So I think this is kind of in the same boat. Even though this is a huge part of her kits because this is what she uses to break Frenzy. However, if you're not frenzied anyway, like that part doesn't even matter. The other gimmick is that if they hit terrain, they are stunned and they take a bunch of damage. But I feel like any version of Riot would kind of just have to do this. And I feel like that's design-wise makes Briar really, really frustrating. The other thing that Briar has going for her is that because she's like a vampire kind of thing, you can kind of just put anything associated with healing off of damage and it would kind of work. Like, oh, she takes a bite and heals. Oh, she shoots projectile or something and heals. I don't know. What's a better? I mean, better project. I don't have that thing. But I mean, like, the idea of just adding arbitrary healing into our kits to fit theme, while not really a good idea, would probably be necessary for Briar. So, okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4 cost. The other problem with this ability is that it like encroaches on the territory that I've already like talked about for like 5 cost of Braum. And if you're to do that as a 4 cost, but like also make it do more stuff, like that'd be like balanced nightmare. I feel like I just can't use her E. And all the other abilities are like the same. Okay. Her passive can probably do something. Like she could just be like a 1 cost spellless ability that has like this bleed and heals. Like that could just be some version of Briar, realistically. Like 1 cost Briar. Maybe even 2 cost Briar. There's been 2 cost spellless Warwicks, I think. Okay, so wait, let's actually revisit the one Briar that exists. This is specifically the ult. And like, okay, he does a lot of things, but I feel like her ult and like the problem is that visually, her being frenzied is the same thing. So even though her ult and her W are technically the same thing in terms of like impact. Her ult obviously does this thing, and in League it is like the long range parts, but like frenzy is still frenzy. So I mean, if I were to be ambitious and call Frenzy from her W and Frenzy from her R different, which I mean they technically are. I mean, like, if it was just copy that for a 2, 3, and a 4 cost, That'd be very uninteresting very quick. And like just changing the numbers. So because of this, okay, so we'll use the bleed for one cost, and then we'll use blood frenzy for one of the, because you can honestly just tune the numbers and make this literally any cost. You can make this a 2, 3, 4 cost. So, we'll, without like committing to a certain slot, we're gonna have the W just be one of them. We're not gonna use the E. Because even if we were to use the E, that would be a 5 cost. So, kind of stuck. So, I think this is going to be the first time where I'm going to have to, like, reference other media for ideas. I have one which comes to mind based on a kind of similar character. Not really, but, like, theme-wise, but, like, gameplay and identity-wise. Go to, Lady Geist Deadlock. So yeah, this character, she's like, I don't know, she's like, I don't know what the lore is. I didn't pay attention to the lore. Great game, by the way. But she has a necromantic pact. And her gameplay identity is that she heals off of what she does. So she's kind of like a Vladimir type champion, or type character, where she does a lot of damage, but she also like wants to get low and heal it up. So yeah, one of her abilities is, where's the one of her abilities? This one, where she like takes some health, and she throws these shards that deal damage and they slow. So I'm kind of thinking that like you can kind of just make Briar do the same thing, where she kind of just like throws these like spike projectiles, and she heals off of the damage, and then that's kind of it. I mean, like, it kind of works. It makes a bit more sense than like using her E, to be honest. But yeah, that's one. And like this would just like it just in a line. It just damages in a line and then heals off of like for a portion of the damage done. Like it can just be like it heals like for 50% of the damage done. Or you can even lower it and make it. You can make it heals for 100% of the damage done, and you can just make the damage lower. That could also be an option, and you can kind of make her like more of a tank. Actually, now that I think about it, one thing you can do with Briar, instead of like you kind of take out the knockback part, but you keep the channel part of her E. Let me I had to go back. I was thinking of the idea of tank. Briar can be a tank. I think it makes more sense for Briar to be a damage dealer, but I think as long as her healing comes from, or like her tankiness comes from healing, I think it might be okay to use her as a tank. Because the idea of making Briar a tank specifically reminded me of like Earthbriar, where her main thing is just she just abuses the channel part. Like the knockback doesn't matter, but she channels and she heals a lot. Let's see if I can show this. Oh. Like, and she would just do this. So basically, during the duration, she would just gain durability and she would heal, and then that's it. And it would do damage, but it wouldn't like knock back or anything. That could be a spell. That could be a 4-cost, honestly. I don't know how much Riot would be interested in making a 4-cost tank Briar, but I mean, the spell kind of works. And that's kind of like the only way that they would be able to use her E anyway, so... Yeah, I kind of locked myself into thinking that the E is unusable based on theme, and while that I personally think that's true, Art can do whatever they want. Like at the end of the day, they printed that the traps jinx.
When people talk about their first language, why isn't body language an option?
The thing is, I feel like if that were to knock back, because it's also it visually and like everything, it's AoE. That would have to be a 5-cost. So like, and that's already been done. So it makes it hard to work with. But I mean, just the channel and like the thing without the knockback, it does damage, and she's just healing. I feel like that could be a 4-cost tank spell. So is that everything we need? Okay, so 1 cost is passive, bleed, and heal. 2 cost is the spike projectile, heals for damage dealt. Lady Geist from Deadlock. 3 cost is Frenzy. And 4 cost is E channel with damage, the durability, healing, and it does damage, and then that's it. No knockback. I think those spells can work for those costs. I'm satisfied with that, honestly. So yeah. That is all the A and B champions. There's C, D. I don't know how far I want to go to next time. Maybe like Caitlyn to Draven. I don't know how many are in each thing, so I don't know. I don't know how to divide it. I'll decide based on how long it takes, like how long it ends up being. I don't want to make it too long. I feel like if I make them too long, if I do 2 at a time, people won't be interested as much. So I would rather have fewer and keep the video like around 25 minutes. Like around that range. I don't know, I'll figure that out once that's a little closer to being done. Yeah, that's all I have for my stream. I have some tech I want to test in TFT in the future. I don't know, the future's being later this week. So I might stream that. But otherwise, that's all I have for today. Short stream. I think it's fine. Those of you who were here, thank you.